Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Counterculture Media Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Anderson. Today, I'm joined by Hannah Cook. How are you doing today?
Great start. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm really bad at intros and outros, and I've been pre-gaming a little bit, so I'm doing great.
Just wave your hands around. It'll be fine. I'll
Wave
get the
them.
message.
Like, so I left. We went grocery shopping earlier, and we picked up our sister-in-law from work, and we had to wait. And so we had groceries in the car, and I got this for red beers. I got this V8 Bloody Mary mix, and
Nice.
left it in the truck too long, and now I'm kind of drinking a red beer slushy.
Slushy. There's breweries doing beer slushies, so I think that's the thing now.
I mean,
so
I'm not against it.
You're just super with the times.
Yeah,
hip with it.
I did it as it was cool. What are you sipping on as your beverage for tonight?
Red wine. I was going to make something more exciting and interesting, but I got lazy. So I just poured red wine because it was there.
I mean, you're allowed to be lazy. That's in the 10 commandments of COVID, I think.
I think you're right. Yeah. You know what? I got the alcohol. I made it happen.
Yeah.
One way or the
other. So today I'm excited because we kind of have a double feature, because I want to talk to you about the subculture that you belong to, as well as your profession in the Colorado Parks and Wildlife.
Got it. Yep.
Okay. But I want to start off with where the cool thing that I didn't know really about you until a few years back, but and I never remember what the name of your girl crew is. I was trying to remember with Stephanie. I was like, yeah, what are they called? The Dirt Girls. Oh, Trail Candy.
Trail Candy.
Did you wear your shirt specifically for the interview?
I did. I'm actually really cold, and it's a t-shirt, so huge sacrifice here.
All right. Well, now that the viewers at home got a nice look at rack, if you want to get a hoodie, that's completely okay.
I don't know. I needed to channel hey, thanks. The spirit of Trail Candy. Now I've got a flannel, even better.
We were I was trying to remember with Stephanie yesterday. I was like, I keep calling them the Dirt Girls. What are they actually called? She's like, yeah, the mud flaps, right?
You know what? Both of those are options that might happen.
I mean, and I was like, I thought that Dirt Girls was a little crusty and insulting, but I did really.
Oh no, I'm a big fan of Dirt Girls.
We'll have to add mud flaps into the repertoire too. So
it reminds me of Bob's Burgers. I think there's a character. She's like a biker, like Harley biker named Mudflap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like when it comes to biking, BMX bike riders get a lot of to do in the world of extreme sports. But what is it that your hubby and his crew do?
So they race enduro mountain biking. So what that is it's kind of a combination of cross country and downhill. Downhill, you put your bike on a chairlift. In the summer, some of the resorts stay open. You put your bike on a chairlift, ride it up, ride your bike down. Cross country, obviously, you're pedaling everywhere. And enduro racing specifically, you have to pedal to each stage, but you're only timed on the downhill portion. So you're exhausted, and then you have to try to do really well on downhill, and it's a multi-day thing usually. So they're riding their bikes for hours and hours and hours, just pedaling and climbing, and then that descent has to be fast and smooth. So
okay, is this is a nationwide thing? I'm assuming it's probably big in Colorado because we have a lot of hills and mountains, but is this Is enduro racing a nationwide sort of thing?
It's international, actually.
International, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So they do races every year. The World Cup, it rotates. They have several World Cup races, but they've done it in like Rotorua, New Zealand. We've gone to races in Mexico,
Hmm.
down in like western central Mexico in the Rockies there. Yeah, all over Canada, all over Europe. I mean, it's a pretty big thing in the mountain biking world, but yeah, no, it's not as well known as like BMX or cross country. That's usually what people jump to when they think of bikes.
Yeah, yeah. So does when he tells people like, oh yeah, like I ride bikes, does he just kind of say that and let people assume what they're gonna assume?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they all love to explain it. They'll talk to you about it for days, for sure, if you're interested. But the short answer is just kind of like I race mountain bikes, and people do they take that and do with it what they will. Um, and yeah, it's not always accurate. And honestly, until you've seen it and experienced it or tried it, it's kind of hard to explain. It's pretty intense.
I mean, yeah, I feel like I've hung out with you guys enough to get the gist of it, but also I think it did take several times of hanging out with drinking beers and just being like, so go down a
Explain it
hill.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and going the downhill portion, a lot of people think like, oh, that's got to be the easy part, right? Like you're going downhill. It's extremely physical. I mean, it's my dog is pushing the table. It's really physical. It takes every muscle in your body, and when you get down to the bottom of the hill, you are exhausted. So a lot of people, when you say, and I mean, even myself, when I was first learning and he said we were going downhilling, I was like, yeah, easy, no problem. I can ride my bike down a hill, picturing like a forest road or something. And I was like, I don't understand why people pay money for this, but yeah, it's really, really physical.
So how, because I know that you have one of your best friends ever, Bree.
Yes.
How did you and your man meet?
We actually met at a punk show at the Triple Nickel in downtown Colorado Springs. Just kind of typical, like we were at a show, he came up and introduced himself. It was, yeah, pretty standard fare
Tale,
there.
tale as old as time. We were in a
Yeah.
mosh pit. He punched me in the face and I fell in love.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I got clotheslined by him and then he apologized and I gave him my number. It's fine.
I mean, I feel like meeting somebody at a show is kind of a good sign that you found someone that's good, unless they're
Yeah.
like at the show and not having a good time. But
Yeah.
like a punk show at the Triple Nickel, that's a really, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. It was kind of an immediate, like, this will work, at
Yeah,
least for a little bit, you know? And the Triple Nickel used to be, I mean, it's closed now, but it used to have
rest
two
in
rooms. So there
peace.
was one room where they would do the music, and then there was kind of like a bar area, separated. And the first couple of bands were really great, and then the next one was not great. And so I left to go sit in the bar area with my friend, and he left to, I don't know, were you following me?
I just wanted to talk to you.
Okay, he followed me out, but we agreed that we didn't like what was like that band, and we really meshed right away. Same taste in music. And then he told me he mountain bikes, and at the time I hadn't been on my bike in years and years, so I didn't have the slightest idea what he was talking about.
Was that like a introduction, like first day knowing each other introduction thing? Like, hey, what's up? I ride a bike.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it was more like, what do you do for fun? And his friend was trying to talk him up, and he he also didn't know anything about mountain biking really. So he was like, oh, Kevin was the state champion for track in high school. And I was like, cool. And he was like, yeah, that was a long time ago. Now I mountain bike, like trying to divert from what Alex thought was super cool, His name's Alex too.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not a well understood thing even here in Colorado. I think it's getting more popular, but yeah, even then it was like that's his best friend and he didn't have any idea what it was. He went
Okay.
to the high school track star thing.
Yeah. It's like if I still introduce myself like, hello, I'm Alex Anderson, senior class president of Rampart High School
Yeah,
2008.
exactly. Exactly.
So,
Hannah Cook, I graduated with honors. Thank you very much. High school, not college.
so moving fast forwarding in your relationship, biking was just probably just a big part. We just like, hey, you want to like come to one of my bike concerts? And
That's exactly what they're called. Wow,
yeah,
you really did do your research.
yeah.
Yeah, actually it was like 2 weeks into us dating. We didn't know each other very well and he was like, oh, I have a race down in Angel Fire. Do you want to come camping with me? Which hindsight, he might have murdered me. Kids don't do that when you've known a guy for 2 weeks, but I went with him. And it was great, but I honestly had no idea what races were like. And I just kind of sat at the finish line and I was like, cool. So I didn't see any of it. What you have to do is if as a spectator, you have to hike because these are races on, I mean, if you imagine a ski resort, they're starting at the top of the mountain and then coming down. So you're not going to see most of it. So if you want to see something good, you have to hike up to a spot where it's really hard and a lot of people are going to fall. And then you make a lot of noise there.
Okay. So, and it's like a preordained spot, just like this is where people eat the most shit. You want front row seats right here.
Yeah, pretty much. It depends on how hard you want to hike because sometimes it's like an hour or more of hiking just to get to a good spot. So sometimes you settle for a mediocre hard spot. But yeah, there's what's called the heckler zone. And usually it's the hardest part on the trail where people are either going to do something really cool or screw up a lot. And so it just attracts crowds of people. Everyone's drinking beer. There's music. It's all very unofficial. The music's usually coming from like my Bluetooth speaker. But yeah, beer, music, and then everyone is yelling. We've got cowbells. We've got, anything that makes noise.
So are you like intentionally trying to make these poor guys fall off their bikes?
That's a loaded question. No. um, no, but people get really excited and yell louder when they do. So
Okay.
it's kind of fun because, I mean, I've never raced, but as a racer, I would imagine it kind of makes things less awkward. Because if you fell in front of a crowd of people and everyone just got silent, it might make you feel even more uncomfortable. So
Yeah.
when someone's instead, getting down on the ground with you and going, get up, it kind of makes it more fun.
Man, I cannot
So,
wait to go to one of these with you because we've been talking about it for a very long time. But this first time you went, you were just at the finish line. Like, were you just hanging out by yourself, just like what, like looking at a mountain, like what's going on?
yep, that's exactly what I did. I could see the finish line, but I sat kind of on a picnic table a little ways back and I was just listening to music. And I thought that this was just like what you do.
Yeah.
I had no idea. And when I finally did it right for the first time, I was like, oh, this is fun. Okay, I get it now.
So in those early days, was there the concept of trail candy? Well, now that we've gotten the boring details of hurtling down a mountain on a bike out of the way, let's talk about what we're here to talk about, which
Yeah,
is trail candy.
trail candy.
So back in the day, like what was there a concept of trail candy? Or is this like something that you and your friends have come up with?
Trail candy is new in the last couple of years. So the way it went, kind of long story short, Kevin met Isaac Racing and Isaac and Luke, and they kind of became an unofficial team. Got super tight, and Isaac was dating Bree, so I met her, and we started going to races together. And then Bree's roommate Gina started coming with us, and we were at a race in Santa Fe. And if you want to go to a race, Santa Fe is the one to do. Of course, it was canceled this year, but we're hoping it'll still happen next year. But it is, the heckler zone there is off the chain.
Yeah.
So that's the one to go to. But we were just walking in between courses, because there's, 4, 5, 6 courses depending on the race. And so you'll go to one, watch them, yay, they did great, let's walk to the next one. So it's just a lot of hiking and drinking all day. But we were walking in between courses, and I don't remember exactly what happened, but I think some guy whistled or turned around and looked at us or something. And I was like, yeah, we look real great, all sweaty and like covered in beer. And Gina was like, yeah. Gina said, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was her. She gets credit for this. She was like, yeah, we're trail candy, like arm candy, eye candy, trail candy. Because I guess that's about as good as you can look on a trail when it's dusty and sweaty and beer soaked.
Yeah, there's definitely like levels of attractiveness, like camping chic is definitely one of them.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of guys who go for that.
The bar has to be lowered. When you're camping and hiking, the bar needs to be way lower than it is normally.
Like, man, she may have some like circles under her armpits, but I can tell she'll drink a beer with me in the mountains, so that's a huge plus.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So then Trail Candy was born. She had shirts made. It kind of became a whole thing, and we got a little bit notorious in the last couple of years. We wear our shirts when we ride too. It's kind of become a uniform. But we were downhilling in New Mexico once, and it was myself, Bree, Gina, and our other friend Jasmine were all wearing them. And Gina sent it and got really hurt and got carted off in an ambulance. And when we went back up to the lift to do another lap, it was just Bree and Jasmine and I. And the lifty was like, whoa, where's the 4th trail candy? And ever since then, every time we go back, he asks, if we're missing one person, he asks where trail candy is. So we've kind of gotten a name for ourselves, I think.
And that just shows your dedication, I think, because like she's in an ambulance, but I ain't stopping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we all popped our heads in there, and the EMTs were like, man, I love girl mountain bikers. It's like, yeah. What is that? He was like, you guys come in the ambulance and you're like, you're a queen and I love you and everything's going to be okay. And guys will like pop their head in and be like, bro, take some ibuprofen. It's fine. Yeah. I mean, it is so true. Like it's a really supportive group. And we've kind of found this really good balance of pushing each other to try new things and get outside of our comfort zones without being dicks about it. If that makes sense. So it's not peer pressure, but it is a healthy push into, I know you can do this, give it a shot. And so that helps you progress and just be better rider. Yeah. And then at races, we just get to have fun and party, and people love it when we show up. We've made it into a couple of kind of, man, what are they called? I almost said zines.
I think they're still zines. I think
are
that's
they?
Right. Yeah.
Like, I don't know, online blogs. It was kind of, yeah, it's called Pink Bike. Okay. And we were holding a sign that said, send it for Satan at one of the heckler zones, and we made it into the zine. We made it onto the internet.
For people who are not as cool as I am 6 months into knowing this term, what does send it mean?
Yeah. Send it is like, it's like telling someone to go for it. But like do it hard, you know, not just like try it. If you're sending it, you're like really launching off of that jump or that drop or you know, the rock garden that you're terrified of.
Mhm.
You're sending it, you're just going like maximum effort all the way through until you land it.
So like if
So
you were to do like a scale of 1 to 10 like of inspiration, like 1 at the bottom would be like you just try your best. And then 10 like you fucking send it.
yeah. Oh yeah,
Okay.
send it all the way. I mean, that's like it's a creed, you know. And
Yeah.
we say it about everything. You know, you'll be sitting there with I don't know if you've had to try Malort yet. That's a whole different podcast. The
What?
counterculture of Malort.
What's Malort?
We'll get you some Malort. It's awful. It's a Swedish liqueur and it tastes like ass and grapefruit. Um, but they love it. They love it so much. They do shots of it before races at like 8 a.m. So as an example, you'll be sitting around with a shot glass of Malort in front of you and you really don't want to take it. And they'll just be like, send it. And then you got to send it. So it can kind of apply to everything,
Man,
which is what I love about it.
if there's anything that I learned from watching Rocket Power as a kid, it's just that sports people have a very different lingo than us, and you got to be cool to know what they're
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah. And different sports have different lingos. I mean, send it is universal in my world, but a lot of people, you know, I just assume everyone knows what it means, but a lot of people don't. You know, different sports have different kind of catchphrases, I guess, but for action sports, I think send it is pretty widely known.
Cool. Um, yeah, man, like I said, I really want to go to one of these bike concerts functions with you one of these days because before COVID went and fucked everything up, like you explained to me, like when people meet up for these tournaments, it's just like it's like a caravan of party, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Can you like give me what you would do on an average going to one of these events?
Yeah. So you get your crew together, you caravan to whatever campsite you're going to. You drink a lot. They wake up super early the next day to just go through grueling racing. The rest of us sleep in and have coffee and pack our bags full of beer and make sure the speakers are all charged up, and then we hike. And you find a spot that looks good. Sometimes there's a lot of people, sometimes it's just you and your crew. But either way, you just kind of set up, crack open some beer, and it could honestly be an hour before anyone even starts coming down. So you're kind of just sitting in the woods and drinking until stuff happens, and then you start yelling and making a lot of noise. And then you have dinner and celebrate afterwards and do it all again the next day. But it's really cool because everyone's kind of in that zone and in that spirit, and so everyone's fun and sharing their beer, and you know, like if you've got extra, you throw a beer to someone else, and yeah, it's just a really fun, happy time.
It sounds like a really awesome community. Like I
Yeah.
really, if it's all right with you, I think I want to get a trail candy like crop top,
Oh,
and
100%.
I'll show up with like some heart sunglasses, and because I want to be, I
Mm-hmm.
want to go to the heckler zone. Like that just sounds like,
Yeah.
because you can go and like anyone can go get drunk in the mountains, right? But
Mm-hmm.
like to go get drunk in the mountains and then just like, all right, so that for the like, and how long does that zone stay relevant? Is it like for a while? Like, do you just get to watch people either do awesome mountain bike shit or eat shit for like an hour or longer?
Yeah. It depends on how big the race is. So there's different classes for each race, just like with anything. So you will have like the amateur men, amateur women, pro women, and then there's Groms, which is like the kids. There's masters, which is older people. I think what is it, above 50? 40, above 40. And so there's different classes. Usually the pros go last. So a lot of people will stay until the pros have gone, and then they'll move on to the next one, or the best heckler zones are the ones that are last stage, like end of the day, they're done kind of thing. And it usually ends on a cool jump or something like that.
Yeah.
And so they'll either hike to the next spot, or if it's one of those end of the race situations, they just go down to the beer garden, which is usually there.
There's a beer garden?
Yeah, well, they usually have, at most races, it again depends on the place. Every place is so different, but there's usually food trucks and beer trucks, and the racers all get free beer, and it's a whole big party. They've got a stage where they do the awards and music's playing and stuff like that. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
I'm really sorry if I'm making you sad with this interview, since it might be a while before all of this happens again.
Yeah, this year was canceled. I mean, we didn't go to a single race this year, which was a huge change for us, for this whole friend group. That's kind of our summer, it's like every other weekend we're going to a race. And yeah, pretty much, I mean, there were a couple of races, but we didn't go to any of them. They were just, schedule conflicts and stuff like that. So it was a bit of a bummer year, but you know what? The heckler zone is just going to be stronger when we get back. Everyone's got some pent up energy that needs to get out.
Yeah. Like you were saying, there's a group called the Groms, which are kids.
Yeah. So Groms.
I feel like that's the part of the race I want to watch the most. Not that I enjoy heckling children, but I enjoy heckling children.
Yeah, for sure. And Groms is actually a term I learned when I lived in Hawaii, with surfers. People would be like, "Oh, look at the little Groms." So I think that's one of those phrases that's kind of universal for action sports too. Just kind of like young athletes that are just little punks. They're Groms. But yeah, it is super fun. I'm always so proud of the Groms. I don't know a single one of them personally, but they, they're riding the same stuff that the adults are most of the time.
Yeah.
And that's incredible, because they ride some hard shit. I mean, it's really scary, but it's fun because you just get to scream. And the more clever you are with your jeers and your cheers, the better it is.
Yeah.
So you get to kind of explore some creativity. One year, so the race in Santa Fe is at a Christian camp, believe it or not. It's kind of the weirdest thing ever, but they have really great trails, so we keep going back. But the first year, and I can't believe they invited us back after this, one of the hecklers dressed up like Jesus and stood up on a rock that was like above the trail and just had a megaphone and was heckling people through his megaphone. I can't believe we got invited back after that. I've seen races, we've never done it because it's so much organization, but I've seen races where people will be cheering and yelling and it's like this huge crowd, and then they decide that they're going to just do a silent cheer. And so one of the riders will come down and everyone's just, this is not going to work on the podcast, but like just acting like they're screaming. So like this rider is just flying by these people, probably really confused because it's dead silent, but everyone looks like they're screaming. Those ones are hilarious. So yeah, people get really creative. It's a lot of fun.
All right. So do you think, are there any prospects of it coming back in 2021, or is it just kind of up in the air right now?
So they've got all the races scheduled. Is Santa Fe still Memorial Day? Yep. Okay. So Santa Fe is still scheduled for Memorial Day weekend. So as of right now, you can plan on it. They might change things depending on how things go, but as of right now, we're on for this summer. Fingers crossed it stays that way.
Hell yeah. If it happens Memorial Day weekend, I want to go with.
Yeah, please do. It is so much fun. Yeah, we'll get some extra trail candy stuff made up. You just paint it on your face. It's fine. All are welcome in trail candy.
Can I paint Kevin's face on my face?
Oh, please. Nothing would make me happier.
Just like no, I'll get a picture of his face on my belly, and I'll
Yeah.
just be like,
And wearing your trail
yeah,
candy crop top. Yeah, it would
yeah.
be perfect. I'm really glad that you're already thinking up creative ways to cheer
I
them on.
I like to belong to clubs, and I think that trail candy just has me written all over it. I mean,
Yeah.
whether you're a mountain biker or trail candy, for some reason, just like the extreme sports world is just filled with attractive people, and I know that I will fit right
Yeah,
in.
absolutely. I can't believe you're not already in.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, trail candy is like universal. You know, there was kind of a core group of 4 or 5 of us that were there when we came up with the term, but it's, you know, all are welcome. Really, the only requirement, you don't have to be a mountain biker. You know, some of us are climbers, some of us are mountain bikers, some of us just hike.
Mhm.
Trail candy is for all. Um, Only requirement is just like be fun, you know.
Yeah.
Be happy and fun and you know, bring the party. And that's kind of the attitude. But we've got so many different people who hang out with us that, I mean, Max has come with us. He just fishes. That's all he does.
Yeah.
So, you know, you really don't have to be any certain type of athlete and into anything in particular. If you can yell and drink and have fun, you're in trail candy.
Hell yeah. Awesome. I'm really I'm really glad you guys are a nice opening group already.
Yeah, and there was, you know, at first there with our group kind of there was a dynamic where it was like, oh, it's the women. The women are trail candy. The men are team lick, which is Luke, Isaac, and Kevin.
Like
Initially I thought kill sounded kind of badass, but they wanted to be team lick. And trail candy is much better because initially what they called us, because we we were kind of the team moms, but instead of bringing like orange slices after the game, it was beer. And so they called us lick moms, which I hated. Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
like
that's a good
that.
face for that. So trail candy is a huge improvement.
From Lick
Mud
Moms.
flaps is a huge improvement. Let's
Mud
be
Flaps
honest.
is yeah, Mud Flaps is a big improvement from Lick Moms.
Maybe we'll come up with different like subgroups within trail candy and we can have, I don't know what mud flaps would be, but we'll find something.
Because I mean, if you were to ever get famous, like if this was like millions of people wanted to know what it was, you would never be the #1 Google results for Lick Moms.
It's so true. It's so true. It would be a problem.
um. So yeah, you're just a you're a nature ass person. Like
I'm a naturey ass person. Yeah.
so
I
it just
like nature.
it fit into your whole schema pretty well. You're just like go down to Santa Fe and just kind of like hang out and drink beer in the woods. Fuck yeah, cool. Like what did you when you went to school after school, I believe you were initially studying to be a marine biologist. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
And how did you go from there to where you work now for the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Service?
So I started realizing when I was in college that marine biology was a pretty restrictive degree because, well, it's the job prospects are limited. So you have to be somewhere coastal, obviously, which already is limited. And then within that, it's extremely competitive. There's a lot of people that want to be marine biologists, and I started realizing that I needed to broaden my horizons if I ever wanted to work in the field. So I changed it to wildlife conservation and wildlife management. I focused on marine mammals still. So I worked with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, at their Hawaiian Island humpback whale sanctuary. Papahanaumokuakea. So I worked there with them kind of as an intern for a while. And at the time they were furloughed. They didn't have money to hire me full time. I had already met Kevin so when I graduated, it was like, either he's moving out here or I'm moving out there, and I don't have a job out here. So, and it's expensive to live in Hawaii. So I ended up moving back, and, you know, I worked at a bank for 3 or 4 years. So it was very much out of my field, but I just needed to pay my student loans, you know?
Yeah.
So finally, I mean, it's competitive in marine biology. It's still competitive even when you're broadening that scope. So anything with wildlife and natural resources is pretty competitive. We're finding that there's more and more jobs available. So if you're listening and you're studying natural resource management, stick with it. People are starting to realize that we need more jobs in that field. But it's a field that people tend to stick with for life. So you either have to wait for someone to retire or a new position to open up, which is what happened for me. They created an entirely new position, and so they didn't have someone internally that was ready to move up necessarily, which was really good for me. I ended up getting the job, and I've been here for almost 5 years.
And what is it that you do? I know that it's a lot like the CIA or the FBI, where a lot of it is very secretive.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I just, you know, it's a government agency, so I'm coming from an unofficial standpoint. I'm not representing the agency here. This is all personal. But basically what I do is I work with private ranchers, farmers, various landowners, both federal and private, to resolve wildlife conflicts. So in the
And that's
state
like
of Colorado.
That's when like buffalo are wrestling, right? Wildlife
Yeah,
conflicts.
yeah, bar fights.
Yeah.
Bar fights among moose.
Moose. No, sorry.
It's wild. No, it's in Colorado, we just don't have the land to house all of the wildlife that we want to house. So we have to work with private landowners, especially, to make it feasible for them to allow, for example, big herds of elk to be on their property. There's the possibility that someone just walks out and starts shooting elk because they don't want them on their alfalfa fields, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is we work with these landowners to try to alleviate the conflicts, to try to make them, you know, less disruptive, and just to kind of create more space for them on federal lands, which hopefully draws them from private onto, well, public, federal or state, or city or county, whatever it is. But ultimately that'll relieve some of those conflicts.
Okay. Well, see, and that's like why I'm really interested to talk to you, is because like I don't really know like a whole lot about it. Like, having been a hunter since childhood, I feel like there's so many things that, like, as just a hunter and like an avid hiker and someone who also very much loves the shit out of the wilderness, I just feel like there's so much that, like, we like to say that the government really doesn't do a whole lot, but there's actually a lot that, like, at least that, like, because the Division of Wildlife, we've all seen Parks and Rec, so we all know that they're the good guys in the government, like. But
yeah, I mean, it depends who you ask. We've got a lot of opposition from different places, and it just kind of depends on the topic. Sometimes we've got environmentalists, and this is often kind of a you know, Facebook comment section situation where that's just the world we live in. Sometimes it's animal rights activists, sometimes it's environmentalists, sometimes it's the hunters. So, you know, it just kind of depends on the topic. We're not always super popular, but we do what we can. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, it's an interesting position to be in, because Colorado Parks and Wildlife is self-funded. So that means that we don't get general tax dollars. A lot of people think that their taxes pay for Parks and Wildlife, and that's not the case. And that's often people's arguments, is like, my tax dollars pay for this, so I should be able to, you know, be a stakeholder and make this decision. No, they don't. What we're funded by is hunting and fishing licenses. And then we get excise tax, which is tax that comes from the sale of guns and ammo. And the way that works, long story short, is just the feds collect those taxes. They go kind of into a pool of money, and then it's distributed between states depending on how many licenses they sell. Okay. So licenses are kind of twofold, because we get the money from the license, and then we also, it counts towards our count for the excise tax, essentially. Okay. So yeah, unless you are buying licenses, you are not funding Parks and Wildlife, and that's just kind of a common misconception. And it gets really interesting, because and I'm the same way, and I have been for a long time, basically until I started working here. We assume that our natural resources, just hiking trails and biking trails and whatever it is, are right. And I would agree with that for sure. But what's interesting is looking at how those properties are funded. And so what we had talked about a while ago when we went camping, and what kind of sparked this discussion, is there are certain properties that people are allowed to access for free, that are paid for by hunters and anglers exclusively. Yeah. And people often don't know that they're, as a hiker, as a biker, equestrian, you name it, cross-country skiing. It's kind of a situation where I don't want to say mooching, because it's,
it's nature.
Like
you
get
should
to be
able
there.
to go back, but this is America.
But you should be thanking a hunter or angler, or somebody who's buying a pass, because they are the people that are paying for that resource to be available to you. And so it's just kind of like a cool, like, food for thought. Did you know that you don't, and it's different for every state, of course. So I'm speaking solely to Colorado, but it's kind of like, did you know that you are kind of being gifted this opportunity for these beautiful hikes, these beautiful trails, by a hunter or an angler? A lot of people don't know that.
And yeah, like when we had this conversation when we were camping in Crested Butte, mm-hmm. Yeah, it blew my mind, because like I had always been under the impression of just like, yeah, man, it's just like nature. Like the government set aside this area of land so that we could just enjoy it, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily the case. Like, this is all like hypothetical, but like, what would happen if, like, I don't know, because in the Colorado Springs ballot this last election, there was this whole thing about the city being able to sell plots of wildlife just like by a city council vote, but that got mm-hmm. shut down, thank God. But is that kind of like how it would work if we didn't have like a Colorado Parks and Wildlife Division like taking in funds from people? Like it would just kind of become an open asset that people could buy?
Yeah, most likely. I'm not sure exactly what would happen, but probably a lot of that land would be sold to private entities, potentially things like oil and gas, mm-hmm. Or just people who want to build developments there. Some of it might be dissolved into cities or counties, which then you do get federal or general tax dollars going to that, to the upkeep of that. But yeah, then you run into those situations where oftentimes those decisions are decided by a council, a city council, and not necessarily the people who are paying taxes. And this is different with every city, but just speaking solely to Colorado Springs, yeah, there was a ballot issue that there was a whole, I don't know if you know what happened with Strawberry Fields, but long story short, that it was a kind of a wilderness area. There were a lot of trails, very popular here in the Springs, and the Broadmoor bought it. And I think traded it. Thanks. I think to build like something like a zipline park or something like that, which is really cool for the Broadmoor and the guests of the Broadmoor. Not so cool for the people who hike there and love that area. They didn't get a say in it. and I don't know all the ins and outs, so this is just kind of my understanding of it, so it could be wrong, but that's why that was on the ballot, was our tax dollars are going to this, shouldn't we get a say in it? Yeah, so it gets complicated depending on which government agency owns the property, or if it's a private entity or something like that. So without Parks and Wildlife, yeah, there would be a lot. I think there would be a lot more issues with access to public land.
Yeah. See, and it blew my mind when we were talking about this. I was just like, it's not just nature, is just nature, man. And then I think back to like my absolute favorite place to hike ever was do you remember like the hole in the wall area, like behind that school or church up in the Rock Rimmon area?
Oh, yeah.
It was
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah.
absolute favorite place in the world to hike, and then it became privatized. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not like as it's Strawberry Field sounds like it was like a very, very popular hiking spot, but for me it's just like it doesn't it just doesn't feel right, even though there's not really shit you can do about it.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, it's super interesting. And I mean, we can get into all sorts of discussions about, and the philosophics dealing with like politics and who owns what,
Mhm.
and the intrinsic value of nature, and that kind of stuff is a whole different can of worms. But ultimately, I think in Colorado, we are very, very lucky, and maybe I'm biased, I don't know, but I think we're very lucky to have Parks and Wildlife, because this agency is protecting open spaces for wildlife, but also for us. And it's really a cool thing that we have in a I don't know, something I think that a lot of people take for granted without even knowing that they're taking it for granted. You know, I know
Yeah.
I was like that. I didn't understand any of this until I started working with them.
Yeah, and like that's why I really wanted to I wanted to talk to you so that I could get it recorded. And I feel like a lot of people, unless like I'm just extra stupid, are going to have the same reaction of just like, wait. Hunters pay for my ability to go hiking?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, and it again depends on the area. It depends on what part of the state you're in. Some parts of the state, it's a lot of state wildlife areas, and that's where people go hiking, and those are the areas that are not paid for by anyone else. If you think about state parks, you have to pay a fee to get in, so that's an obvious, you're paying for that. Federal land is paid for by tax dollars. County and city land is often paid for by tax dollars. So we're speaking pretty specifically about Parks and Wildlife properties where you're not paying to get in. But in some parts of the state, that's almost all of it. That's where you hike. That's where you go for open space. In Colorado Springs, not so much, because we do have a lot of city and county open spaces that we're able to access. But one thing to think about too is Parks and Wildlife funds a lot of stuff on other people's property. So for example, a conservation easement, that protects private lands from development, from future development, which is really cool, because with the way that the state is just kind of blowing up with people, keeping open spaces open is really, really vital. I mean, could you imagine if the entire state looked like Denver? And that would be severely depressing. So things like conservation easements, things like, are you still there?
Yeah.
My iPad just
You're fine.
low battery. It's all right.
You're
It's
good.
plugged in now. We also pay for things like trail maintenance and forest management. So a lot of the places that you go probably wouldn't be accessible without some money from Parks and Wildlife.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just the properties that we own. It's also, we do a lot of work in a lot of places to make it habitable for wildlife, which in turn makes it more accessible for people.
Mm-hmm. Like something I didn't realize or like early on in my life until later when I was like learning like my family history is that like logging roads, like a lot of the roads and like highway systems that we have throughout the mountain ranges don't exist for the benefit of us hikers and nature lovers. Like I was just like,
Yeah.
when I was a kid, I was just like, yeah, these roads were built so that we could go and find some nice like hiking spaces. But like if you look back at the history of where it all came from, it's just like, oh no, nobody ever actually had that in mind. And hiking is actually kind of like a, I don't know, turn of the 1900s sort
Yeah.
of like
It's
thing.
and it's a bit of a luxury too. I
Mhm.
think yeah, I think again it's just something that we growing up in Colorado, we are so fortunate because we just have so much nature available to us. And that's not the case for a lot of people. I think
It,
we're a little bit spoiled, which is great.
yeah.
But yeah, to think about where it comes from and how much it costs just to upkeep things like this, natural spaces is, I mean, it's not something I ever considered. It was just kind of like, it's there.
Yeah. And
The
it's,
trail is there. It was made by a deer. Well, that's probably not true, you
yeah.
know? So, yeah, it's just kind of a cool thing to think about. No matter where you live, there's probably different nuances for every state. But except maybe Alaska, because there is real wildlands out there. But for the most part, most natural areas that you go to are run by some sort of government entity. And you just kind of have to consider, where did this funding come from? Um, I hike here every day. Should I make a donation? Maybe. I don't know. Is
And
that
that's
something
just,
you feel like doing, that you feel like is going to make you feel better? Great. But a lot of people just don't even have that thought cross their mind.
yeah. Like for a long time, every time I went to like state land, it was just like, I have to pay to park here. That's bullshit. This is nature.
Yeah.
But it's just like, it's, it's just kind of the truth of America. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
everything, like, except for like national national park land, like is a different sort of situation, right? But other
Yeah,
than
so well,
that,
national parks generally still, well, depending on which one it is, but sometimes there's still a fee,
mhm.
which helps to pay for upkeep of the land and all of that kind of stuff. And man, there's a lot that goes into it. I used to think it was just like bathrooms and parking lots, but whew, that's like every inch of that land is being managed in some way for the benefit of wildlife or recreation or whatever the goal is of that particular area, and that particular agency. There's a lot of work that goes into that.
And I just had a thought. We had another bill on the ballot this last election, and it was for allowing wolves to roam freely again. Correct? Something,
Reintroduction of wolves.
reintroduction of wolves. Yes.
Yeah, so we do have some wolves that are coming into the state naturally.
Mhm.
And this ballot measure was to physically bring wolves from somewhere else and place them in Colorado. So it doesn't have to do with the wolves that have come in to the state from Wyoming. But yeah, it brings with it a whole lot of management questions. You know,
As
are
the,
they going to be on the endangered list? Are they not? Because that depends, or that dictates who manages them.
mhm.
If they're on the endangered list, then they're managed by U.S. Fish and Wildlife. If they're not, if they're delisted, then they're managed by that state.
Okay.
And of course, there are all sorts of different loopholes and situations, but that's kind of the short and sweet of it.
I was gonna ask, just like, since your whole job is dealing with animal brawls in the woods, like it might make your job a little more complicated, huh?
Yeah, and I can't talk too much about it because the ballot measure did pass, and now it's going to be up to the Parks and Wildlife Commission um, to make the plan and the implementation of that to carry everything out, and that's not finalized yet. So I really don't have any information on that, but it is going to be complicated because yeah, we have to figure out who's in charge of managing them, who's going to pay for lost livestock, for example. Things like that it adds a different layer of complication for sure.
Cool. You have a really cool job.
I like it a lot. I do. I really like it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's cool to be able to work with our natural resources, which I also get to enjoy on the other side, you know, as a mountain biker and a hiker and whatever other sport I feel like trying that day. It's cool to kind of get the backside of it and be working every day on that part where we're doing work to protect and conserve and preserve certain areas. And then I get to go enjoy it in my personal time, which is really cool.
You're just looking around like, thank you, me.
Thanks, me. You did great. You're doing so well. Yeah, and I mean, you know, nature is so important. It's so important for so many people. And there's a podcast called I think it's called Dirtbag Diaries. Patagonia produces it. I think the production company is First Duct Tape Then Beer, which is, I gotta tell you,
Really
if I had $1 for every time Kevin bandaged a wound with duct tape,
it works.
I have some money. It's kind of, there was one time, I mean, I wasn't there, but I heard the story that he wrecked on his bike. He was supposed to go somewhere and he showed up straight from that crash basically and just wrapped his arm in a plastic bag, like a shopping bag, and then duct taped it and then like went to the place. So he just had like a bloody Safeway bag on his arm. Anyway, I digress. He said that's what I call a Tuesday. There's a podcast called Dirtbag Diaries. And one of the episodes I listened to, it's a really cool, like really short stories of just people and their adventures. And sometimes it's directly the adventure. Sometimes it's kind of the ritual surrounding it, like trail candy, that kind of stuff. But there was one episode where they were talking about coronavirus and how this affects people, and especially in somewhere like Colorado. I think she lived in Loveland or something, with all the fires. And California and Idaho, you know, you name it. But for people who thrive off of action sports or just being out in nature in general, when you start hearing that you can't gather, when you start hearing that, you know, there's all these dangers, even though we know now that being outside is a lot safer than being inside, but then outside is filled with smoke. And like, what are you going to do? You can't ride your mountain bike. You know, you can't do a strenuous ride when it's that smoky. It's going to just crush your lungs. And so the kind of lingering depression that comes with all of this, it's different for everyone. Everyone has their own struggles with all of this. But speaking from an you know, outdoor enthusiast perspective, yeah, it gets really tricky because that's the outlet. That's, you know, that's therapy. Not to say that I'm not also in therapy, but like it is its own form. Like you can have both, right?
Yeah.
My therapist is great. So is mountain biking. So it just kind of, yeah, it adds different layers of like, for some people that's their only outlet. And if they can't do that, yeah, we start having problems. So yeah, we're all dealing with different shit with all of this, unfortunately, but, it makes you think more about what would happen if my access to these trails and to these open spaces was cut off.
Yeah.
It'd be bad. A lot of people in this state and all over the country and all over the world just survive off of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's important to protect that.
Yeah, man. I couldn't have said it better myself. If I was good at doing the outros for podcasts, I would like agree with you by saying something really deep, like in return. But like all I really got is like, yeah, like, absolutely.
That works.
Yeah, man. So it was called Dirtbag Diaries.
Dirtbag Diaries. Yeah.
Dirtbag Diaries. All right.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's just like 30 minutes. Some of the episodes are like 4 minutes, and it's just people talking about their adventures. It's really fun. There's a lot of episodes. You can fill a lot of time with it, but yeah, just kind of a fun short, like, here's what I do. And it's cool because you do kind of get the sense of that world and how people thrive off of it. And, you know, when you've got, there's the whole like endorphins thing, obviously, from working out. So when you're doing a really steep climb on your bike or on foot or on cross country skis or whatever it may be, you get those endorphins, and endorphins make you happy, and happy people don't kill their husbands. And then and then when you're descending, so just speaking purely from a mountain biking perspective, you've done this really hard climb, you're exhausted, you kind of hate everything for a second because you're just so damn tired. And you get to the top and you've got this amazing view. And then you start your descent, which is usually pretty exciting. So you've got a lot of adrenaline because it's hard stuff. It's really scary sometimes. And that adrenaline kind of brings this, especially in combination with the endorphins, it kind of brings this forced clarity. Like you just can't think about anything except that trail. And that's a super healing process because your brain finally shuts down. And for those of us with like anxiety and depression and ADD and ADHD, you name it, that's really hard to do. It's hard to shut your brain down and to stop thinking about the things that you don't want to think about. And so you just get this brief, pure second of all I can think about is that rock in front of me. And I think that's really important for a lot of people because it just brings this sense of quiet and calm when your heart is racing and you're scared shitless.
As you're hurtling downhill at 50 miles an hour.
Yeah. I mean, I have started a ride and been just like anxiety through the roof about, you name it, work, whatever. And I'll ride and I'll like crash or something, or just do something that I've never done before, something really exciting. And it takes me honestly like hours to even have those thoughts, like after the ride, hours to even have those thoughts come back into my head. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh man, what was I stressed about earlier? I don't even remember because I'm bleeding from my chest. It's really, yeah, it's therapy for a lot of people. It's important for a lot of people. And it's just fun as shit, man. Yeah. It's so fun. The trail candy heckling part of it is a party. Everything else is also a party, just in a different way.
Yeah, man. Well, here's to hoping that we get to party this year.
Yeah. We'll do a follow-up episode if and when you come to your first race.
Oh man, I'll just bring
my live stream it.
Yeah. Like, by then I'll be like a famous reporter type podcaster guy, and I'll do like live from Santa Fe. This is Alex, part of Team Trail Candy. And then we go, woo!
and then the screaming. Yeah, it'll be great.
Well, before we sign off, do you have any usually, I don't know, this is where I'm bad at doing the end of a podcast.
Do I need a catchphrase? Shit.
Yeah, like is there some good like resources? Like, no, you were saying earlier, like if this is the first time you're hearing that you're not just hiking for free, where's a good place to find out how and where you can donate to these resources that are allowing you to experience this beautiful nature?
Yeah, it'll depend on what state you live in and all that kind of stuff. But in Colorado, cpw.state.co.us is a good place to go. You can kind of see everything that we do and your options for recreation and stuff like that with us. And there's also an option to donate. But it's interesting because it does take some research to learn this stuff. If someone's not telling you, oh, we're self-funded just by the licenses we sell, how would you know that? It's not necessarily public information all the time. So it's really interesting because a lot of people, it would be really hard to find. I don't know how I would look up like what Arizona is like. You know, it's not necessarily advertised. In Colorado, we have the Hug a Hunter campaign. I don't know if you've seen those commercials. That was an attempt to explain to people in a real short commercial, your hunters and anglers are the ones that are paying for these resources. It wasn't it wasn't necessarily well received.
Yeah.
A lot of people just still didn't get it because it just was too short of a blurb, and it didn't really explain it quite enough. But call your local wildlife office, see what's up. They often have volunteer opportunities, and those are fun. Like here, I've taken a lot of friends up on sheep counts on Pikes Peak. We get up at like 3 a.m. and go hike Pikes Peak in the dark, and then try to get to a certain vantage point by sunrise and then count bighorn sheep. It's really fun. Yeah, it's a great time. So, there's a lot of volunteer opportunities, and those are good ways to learn about your local natural resource agency, whether it's the state wildlife agency or just a local nonprofit. There's a lot to learn.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Hannah. I came in here knowing what I remember from being very drunk with you one night in the mountains once. And now I feel, yeah, like you're very well informed. This is very informational, and I'm coming out of this feeling smarter and also more appreciative of nature from inside
Good.
on a snowy day in a basement. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a success in my book.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening to the podcast, and I'll think of a catchphrase one day.
Send it for Satan.
Send it for Satan.